Today's title is Magnetic Fields, and this is the first lesson in our new topic, which is magnetism and electromagnetism. Now, you will have come across magnets before in Key Stage 2, so at primary school, so you should have a basic knowledge, but we're going to be recapping everything you've learnt already. So, firstly, what is a magnetic field? A magnetic field is an area which magnetic materials experience force. In the diagram shown here, we can see what is known as a bar magnet. And these lines around the bar magnet represent the magnetic field. So that's what is meant here. You can draw a magnetic field using magnetic field lines. So these lines here are known as magnetic field lines, and they show the shape and the direction of the magnetic field around a magnet. So going back to that first statement, an area in which magnetic materials experience a force. So if I place a magnetic material, such as iron or cobalt, this material will experience a force, and if it experiences a force, it will move. So that's why an iron object, for example, will move towards a magnet when it is in its magnetic field. So when it is in its vicinity or close by, it will move towards it. So here is another diagram of a bar magnet showing its magnetic field lines. One thing here that is really important to note is that the arrows always go from north, so from the north pole or the north end of the magnet, to the south pole or the south end. So it's always from north to south. And we can see this on the diagram. So these arrows at the top, they're all going from north to south in this direction. At the bottom as well, from north to south. The lines going away from the north pole are going outwards like this, and they will eventually loop round, just a larger loop, but that's not included on this picture. And if we look at the south pole again, arrows are facing inwards to the south pole, so it's always away from the north pole and towards the south pole. We can also see from this diagram that close to the poles of the magnets, our magnetic field lines are really close together, and when they're close together, that means we have a really strong field. So if the lines are close together, we have a strong field. If we have a strong field, then we'll have a strong force. So a stronger force which attracts magnetic objects. And as we move away from the pole of the magnet, we can see that the field lines get further apart, so that means we have a weaker field. And eventually we'll get so far away from the magnet that we don't feel the effects of the magnet, so an object might not feel the attractive force towards the magnet anymore. So we know that magnetic objects will always move towards the magnet when they're in its magnetic field, but when we have two magnets together, they behave a little differently. So here we have 4 different diagrams of pairs of magnets. Now this you might remember from Key Stage 2, but when we have opposite poles, and by opposite poles we mean north and south, they attract. So opposite poles will always attract. So if we have a north and a south pole facing, such as in number 1, they will move towards each other, which we can represent with 2 arrows just like this. So I'll give you a chance now just to pause it, copy these diagrams into your notes, and draw the arrows to show which way each of the magnets in the pairs will move. So numbers 1 to 4, draw out the diagrams and draw the direction of the arrows. Okay, so let's just go through the answers quickly. Make sure you use a different coloured pen if you'd like to correct anything. In number 2, we can see we have a south and a south pole facing each other. We call poles of the same type like poles, and like poles repel. So south and south are like poles, so they will repel, which means they will move away from each other. Number 3, north and north. These are also like poles, so they will repel, so they should be moving away from each other. So they repel. And in number 4, we have a north and a south facing each other, so they will attract because they are opposite poles. What will happen? The magnets will move towards each other until they are touching. So give yourself a tick for the ones that you got right, and if you didn't get any right, please have a look over them again, and remember to use the comments if it still isn't making any sense. So let's have a subtitle of Investigating Magnetic Field Lines. We can do a few investigations using equipment in the lab to plot magnetic field lines. As we're not in the lab, we'll just be learning about them instead and using an online simulation. So first of all, in the picture shown is a bar magnet, and these grey lines you can see around the outside are called iron filings. These are just really small bits of iron that when placed in a magnetic field, they align in the shape of the magnetic field. So tiny little bits that line up in the magnetic field. And if you look closely, you can see that these field lines are the same as the ones that we saw in the previous diagrams. So we have, let's draw some approximate shapes like this. So this is the shape they're making. I'll draw in a few lines here, a few more here. And we can see that curved shape in the middle, and then at the sides these lines going off out to make those larger loops. So iron filings give us the shape of the magnetic field, but they don't give us the direction of the magnetic field. This doesn't matter though, because we know that the magnetic field always points from north to south. So we can add in the directions with our arrows here. So the iron filings have shown us the shape of the magnetic field, and we can deduce the direction based on what we already know, that it always goes from north to south. So these lines here on the south pole, we're going towards the south pole. So away from the north and towards the south. So this is what it should look like. All I would do on this diagram is add a few more arrows in this end so we can see them, because at the moment they're all just on the left hand side. But that is what our shape should look like. Okay, so continuing with investigating magnetic field lines, next I'd like you to follow the worksheet and investigate the 2 different methods for plotting magnetic field lines. So we've already looked at the first one, iron filings. So there's a bit more on that, very similar to the example that I just showed you. So if you do get stuck, please come back and have a look at it again. And the second one is using plotting compasses. So make sure your notes are in order and then go on to the worksheet, which is attached as a PDF.